Yep.
New England is known for its lobster roll, but this is not what usually comes to mind. This is an all-terrain lobster designed to negotiate roads, sand, and water. It was created by a dream team of participants of the Lowell Kinetic sculpture race with the goal of traveling across the country to compete in California. If you're lucky, as we were, you'll get to see it in action on the city streets, as we did when we found the sculpture and race director Mike Roundy at the Lowell Folk Festival.
Bam.
Kinetic sculpture races around the United States are human-powered all-terrain sculptures. They go through mud, they go through sand, they can go through oceans, rivers, you name it. We brought this out to the 50th Kinetic Grand Championship, which happened this past Memorial Day. The lobster has made it to the ocean! And it's a 3-day race. It's the original race. It started in 1969. It's grown to 3 days. It covers over 50 miles.
Number 141, lobster roll!
Hungate worked on the claws. He did a wonderful job with those. And we had Nick Anastasia, Carl Henderson, and Jay Dengot and myself were the kind of the core of the 5-person team. And so I was more the logistics person, and the 4 of them really kind of worked on getting all the other kind of elements of the sculpture together.
We started meeting at the beginning of the year, around January, and said, all right, what are we going to do? Can we actually pull this off? And, you know, came up with, we need to make something super New England if we're going to drive across the country and represent the Lowell Sculpture Race in California. And so after spitballing some ideas around, we came up with, all right, we're making a lobster.
The claws were my design, my task, and I built those using the 55-gallon drums. Actually, they were more like 30-gallon drums, I guess, that I picked up in New Hampshire. They were a red that just seemed perfect for lobster color.
They actually raise up and down. So when we go into the water, we can lower the barrels down further so that the actual seats and the rest of the machine kind of rises up above the water.
I had an old car jack that had been kicking around the garage for years. I knew I was going to use it for something and decided it would be a great thing for here to make the claws adjustable so they could be up when we're on land, and then when we get in the water we can then crank them down and get our flotation higher. And that worked out great. I built the claws, the actuating claws, out of foam and plywood, and then created a framework which hinged the claws from behind the claws so that they could raise and lower.
Yeah, Pastry Queen sat on the front and she'd pull these ropes and it would make the claws go up and down as we went down the road.
Nick Anastasia had built this little test bicycle for working out his design. Nick really did a huge amount in figuring out the mechanics of the lobster roll. So this is where the pedals are, where you'd crank, brings the power down to a crankcase here, which then takes it to the back wheel. And he and Carl made this shaft that basically ties 2 wheels together, makes them one. So Nick built this bike and rode it around Somerville for probably 6 months. He said he put almost 200 miles on it. And his design clearly worked for the rear wheel. So we then decided, okay, as our kind of dream team of experienced racers, we would have a 3-pilot machine.
It's got a pretty complicated drivetrain to get each, so there's 3 people that ride it. Each has their own set of pedals and each powers a single wheel, so it's 3-wheel drive. Each person has 72 speeds. You know, your normal bicycle is like, oh, I've got 18 speed or 21 speed. This one's got 72 speeds per person, which is, what was your calculation? Like 400,000 speeds? if you combine all the seats together.
Those slats are for, they're paddles, so they're for paddle wheels, so when you're actually in the water, when you're pedaling, it actually moves it forward like a paddle wheel boat.
Because it was the 50th golden anniversary of the race, we ended up winning the award for the goldiest of the gold, which is our bragging right is they made up an award just for this race and we won it, so we won an award that no one can ever win again.
I think it means we embodied sort of the spirit of the 50th race, which was like, the 50th race was supposed to be special, so we did something special. We came all the way across the country to do their race. Good news is it still rolls. Yay. Oh no. I'm Carl. I like getting out in the garage and cutting things up and welding them together, and it's a great creative outlet. You get to do a lot of engineering thinking. Even if I don't have a mechanical engineering background, it's still fun to read about it and think about it. Rather than, I've played video games that are, you know, mechanical engineering type actions. It's fun to go out in the actual garage and do it. It's kind of like building a treehouse, but it rolls along the street. This year, we were brainstorming new ideas, and we thought it would be really fun to retheme this as the lottery. So we're gonna try to get some beach balls and put big numbers on them and put them inside so they're all bouncing around and rolling around as we're going down the street. And it should be really funny, hopefully, and maybe give us a little extra flotation, or I don't know, we're not sure. But
it might make it more water resistant, I think, almost. It might be harder, like slower to go in the water, but yeah.
We're not sure if it'll make it faster in the water or slower in the water. But that was, so we want a new theme for this year. And because everyone last year was sad that we didn't actually have any ice cream floats to hand out to the crowd, this year we can just tell everyone they didn't win the lottery. And so that's the new theme we want to do. And mechanically, we want to add a drive system to the ball, because last year we just would get up and push the ball to get extra, you know, movement in the mud. But we have a plan for a drive system. We're going to try out a winch, hand-operated winch system, and we might adjust the flotations so that we're a little more stable coming in and out of the water. We might move the rear barrels around so they don't drag in the mud, because they did drag in the mud last year. But that could be a problem if the mud is soupier or if it's stickier or something. We don't know. It's better not to drag any parts in your mud.
I am a improv comedian, chocolate tour giver, and a bike mechanic, obviously, for last year. I have always enjoyed mechanical projects, but I rarely have gotten many opportunities to do them, I feel like. Being friends with Carl has offered me access to all of his tools and his workshop. And so when he and Nick a couple years ago did the first kinetic sculpture race, that seemed really exciting and interesting to me. And also seeing, I think, their failures in that was inspiring, was motivating. If you build a thing and some of it doesn't really work out, that's kind of half the fun.
I'm Nick. I'm the other third of ice cream floats, or the other fifth of the lobster roll, depending on what sculpture we're talking about. I think I have been best described recently as I'm a Renaissance professional. My current motto is retire early, retire often, which goes quite well. So, I mean, professionally, I'm occasionally a software engineer, a bicycle mechanic, a parkour instructor, and educator of all of those things. So I try and do a little of a lot of different things, and that keeps life very interesting, including stuff like this contraption behind me.
I'm an artist, mostly a sculptor. I do stone carving as my fine art, or traditionally that's what I've done, traditional stone carving. And then I make little plaster gargoyles and statuary, and make the original clay, and then make molds of those. And cast them in plaster and cement. Been doing that for a lot of years. Probably about 25 years. And about 3 years ago, I discovered the world of kinetic sculpture racing. Went out to California, saw a race there, and started building machines. My daughters have been fortunate enough to be part of the process on the team of the iconic flying fish in the first year and the second year. And this year they decided that they should be pilots, not just pit crew. And I'm all for that. So trying to integrate more family into the family-friendly event.
We plan on spending some time watching him and trying to learn things. Like we might do some welding, which we have not done before. And we plan on doing a lot of artwork for it and designing the logo and stuff like that.
For this machine, we helped to come up with the idea of the rocket ship because we were trying to come up with something that would be a triangle shape for the two wheels in the back and the wheel in the front. So we thought of a spaceship, and then we thought of, well, we could be astronauts or aliens, and we decided on aliens. And we're thinking we're gonna go for a lot of holographic things to make it alien-esque.
The thing about kinetic sculpture racing that I find most interesting is it's kind of returned back to my teenage years where I used to take apart bikes, put them back together again, mostly in the way they were supposed to, but sometimes I'd mix and match pieces. This Cosmic Cruiser is the machine this year. And I haven't had as much time to dedicate to designing and building it as I have with the Shark. The Shark I started working on a year ahead of time. So it's, I worry that I've got too much on my plate before the race, so we'll see how much art gets integrated into this machine. I did start acquiring parts early on. I knew I wanted to go with a three-wheeled machine again for stability. Once you get into four wheels, you've got to work out ways to get the front and rear wheels to flex but still remain on the ground and have traction. Whereas with the three wheels, you're always, finding traction. I'm hoping that this year with three times as many power, but it's also going to be 3 times as heavy. Hopefully we will be able to plow through the mud. That's my biggest challenge is the mud. Although with the added weight, there's going to be an issue with flotation. Obviously, you don't want the machine to sink out in the Merrimack River.
Ready or not, it's race day. The crowd coming out early to check out the new creations. The crew of the Lobster Roll has already had a good warm-up.
We rode it into town last night. We didn't trailer it here. So we rode this 4 miles from where we built it to get it to the race. So we've already done 4 miles, so as long as we make the first 2, we've done 6 miles and we've completed the race, I think.
But they've decided to call an audible on the mud pit.
It was built for the California race, which has sand dunes and not mud, which are a significantly different problem to tackle. And so we decided that based on how much abuse the machine took in California, we didn't really have the time or the money to rebuild and modify the drivetrain and rework it for mud. So sadly, we are not trying to ace this race. We will be fast on the road and fast in the water, but we're gonna have to push it through the mud.
The lottery has had some repairs and is ready to roll.
The sculpture survived well enough that we were willing to rebuild the front wheels anywhere that it broke, and a little bit extra on top of that, and it should be good to go for this race now. We also made some modifications for the mud pit. Last year the wheel was just one piece of conduit. Well, it was one piece here and one piece here that went all the way around. But now we've got two layers of conduit here and 2 layers over here. And we welded a lot more of the joints, whereas last year it was just bolted. So it should be a lot stronger. It's also rounder, so it won't pound the ground as much when we get up some good speed.
It was very tippy in the water last year, but they've decided to just go with it.
Yeah, embrace it. We've got a paddle to push on the ground, and we've got our outriggers are just really small, but they do keep you from tipping all the way over. So it should excite the crowd. And we'll be excited too, because we don't actually know how bad it can tip.
It took a last-minute push, but the Cosmic Cruiser has taken shape.
We've got a lot of recycled stuff in here, recycled pool noodles. These are lights from Savers. They're hanging pendant lights, water bottles, soda bottles, Solo Dixie cups in the back. The blasters in the back, those are big reflectors from like tungsten lights, industrial tungsten lights that I salvaged out of the dumpster. Stitch here for our mascot here. And he can ride up front if he wants, or if the girls need help, he can ride back here as well.
We have a team from California. We have 2 teams from Baltimore. We have 2 teams from Lawrence, which we're really excited about.
The 2 teams from Lawrence faced a huge obstacle in just getting here. Only 1 week before the race, their town was reeling from a series of disastrous natural gas explosions.
The explosion is something that is going to have long-term effects on a large part of our community. It was a week and one day, and that made some of the final preparations a challenge. A week before, when half of the city was evacuated from their homes, and finishing their project and being prepared for the race was not the first thing on everybody's mind. YDO was started in the mid-2000s by a man named Howard Stickler. His theory was to engage kids in things that they were interested in, to build upon their strengths, and then give them exposure to experiences and opportunities that they did not have access to.
For the past 2 years, ever since the Lowell Kinetic Sculpture Race started, we've been attending it. And you know, every year that we gone, it was like, wow, this is so cool. Imagine if we did this. And then one day we thought, let's just stop imagining and actually do it. Find kids who are actually invested in engineering and wanted to do a cool project. And so that's how we assembled both teams.
The original idea was to have a very long horse with a chariot. It was very similar design to the Squirtle Squad, except that we had, you know, a different theme of the hippocampus, the fish horse, essentially.
Our vehicle is called Silver Streak. It's based on the movie by the same name, starring Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. We've got 2 pilots, and it started out as 2 mountain bikes. They're fat tire mountain bikes, so we can go over all kinds of terrain with that. Each pilot has 2 seating positions as well. That's very unique to most vehicles. And so we can sit reclined, or we can sit up and top on the bicycle seats. We have a separate propeller drive system for the water. We use inflatable pontoons to float the vehicle. So you won't see a locomotive floating on the water anywhere else. I can guarantee that.
It's time to get the party started.
We like to party. So wake up, friends, now grab your horn and get naughty. Get naughty. Get naughty. We like to party. So wake up, friends, now grab your horn and get naughty.
These feats of art and engineering have a tough task ahead of them. They'll be racing through the streets of Lowell, going down the Bone Shaker Alley of Middle Street, over to the maddening mud pit near the Saga Center. Then it's off to the Heritage State Park, where they'll brave the waters of the Merrimack River, going down the boat ramp, and then navigating their way to the sand beach, which they need to get up before racing back to the finish line on Market Street.
Let's go, folks! Put your hands together for these teams that have been working their tails off! I will remember the one rule! To rule them all! I will have fun for the glory!
When you ride your art project down the road, you need to be ready to do some repairs at any moment.
Should be good now.
We realized that the chariot was very inefficient because it's literally just added weight. But we decided that the aesthetics would look really cool, so we kept it.
Here they are in the maddening mud pit, which is 50 feet long, 15 feet wide, and 8 inches thick. What we'll get to see in this obstacle is how their engineering skills are really put to the test. Do they have enough gears to get through this? Can they stay on top of the mud, or are they going to sink right in?
it's go time.
Here they come. Oh, they got fat tires. Look at that.
Use your Pokemon power!
Did I just hear a sad trombone? If you can see them. What a design! Look at this globular design! The globe of power and speed. There is technology involved. This is high technology. This is ingenious. You've heard of STEM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. It's STEAM, yes! It's STEAM power. They're going, go, go, fast. Yes, we have momentum. We're going. Oh, the crank is working.
All right. Through the mud there, Lonzo. Roll right on through. Right, all right. Oh, snap. You can do this. You can do this. Phil is all by himself.
Oh, I see manual dexterity being applied to the front wheel, yes. We have a high pedal power ratio. I just want to wish you the best of luck. I know he sat in his butt a long time last year.
You can do it, Jay. Come on, Jay. Pedal, pedal, pedal. You can do it. You have the alien glasses on. That is all the power that you need.
Jay finally made it through the mud. Thanks, girls. It's off to Heritage State Park and the Merrimack River to see how seaworthy these machines are. It's the end of the road, though, for Neptune's Whip. Maybe with a redesign, they can come back better than ever next year.
For the glory! Yay!
Yes, but clearly, some moments are more glorious than others. There's only one way to attack a challenge like this one, with gusto.
That lobster is heading for deep water, Sheriff Dean. Got no left.
The other left.
had a great partner, Amanda, who hadn't been on the sculpture until the starting bell of the race. She'd never even ridden it on the road. So she did awesome. She was steering us all over the place.
Part of the fun of this race, in my experience, is that you never really know, and there's always going to be something that goes wrong, usually more than one thing that goes wrong. So I kind of expected, I went in with no expectations, but sort of thinking that things could be really messy, and that's part of why it's so gratifying, I think, is to just have to figure it out on your feet.
We know to get people who know how to ride bikes, but we also need to know how to get people who know to row a boat. Because like I said in the water portion, we didn't do very well at all. You know, one person was rowing faster than the other person, and that would lead us to going straight to turning out sideways, and then they had to adjust. And on top of that, our actual paddles were very flimsy and weak.
I think probably Fiona carried most of the weight on her side, certainly the last half.
The two in the back do the most pedaling because the front has very low gears. But it was nice and wet in the back too. And the propellers are right underneath the seats, so they splashed up all the water on us. That water is pretty gross.
I thought that we were going to make it up fine, and then we hit the sand and I dropped a chain in the front, and it was all, you needed to have front wheel drive in the sand. They didn't even have contact with ground yet.
Just push on the wheels as hard as I could. I didn't think we'd get out though.
When we were getting out of the water, I thought we might have needed to end up getting pushed because my chain came off, I had to put it back on, and then my dad's chain came off, and it didn't seem like he could get it back.
You got it, Jay.
So my chain dropped. I tried to get it back on, dropped again. Finally, I was walking the wheel.
You're close. You're like 8 inches away.
That was tough. That was tougher than the mud this year.
The lottery was in no mood to cooperate, giving Carl and Amanda a wild ride, precariously pitching from one side to the other.
She was a great sport. She was climbing all over the sculpture, keeping it from tipping over, and jumping on the pedals and pushing the ball.
I thought we were going to flip over many times, so I would just jump from side to side, basically. And I was mentally preparing to be in the water and feet in the air and all of that, but I was just trying to keep us afloat.
The winch has a removable handle so that it's easy to get the line, handle the rope, pull it off, rewrap it whichever way you need to, and then you put the handle back on. But the handle doesn't lock into the winch in any way, shape, or form. So at some point it fell out. I think the sculptor probably did one of these and tipped one way, and the handle fell out in the water.
He's going in! He's committed! Got it!
So I just sort of looked down and I'm like, yep, that's not floating. And I would really like to have that winch handle, and it belongs to my roommate. It's not mine. So I just jumped off and jumped in the water, and I was completely in over my head, just groping around for the handle.
Come on, lottery! Come on!
Getting that winch was a smart move. It was crucial for getting up the sand beach, which caused lots of problems for the sculptures.
I don't know how we thought of it, but we sat around for days trying to think of a good way to drive that big front wheel. The sailboat winch, sort of like a belt. It's sort of like having a belt wrapped around a pulley, but instead of needing friction, we just tied the rope off to the ball so that the rope can't slip very far. It's just tied to the ball. Take the rope and you wrap it a few times around that winch, and it works a lot like a ratchet. It turns in one direction, but it won't turn in the other direction. The climbing out of the water, climbing on the ball to get it out of the water was so much fun. We always thought we might do that, but we didn't have to do it last year. And then getting to do it this year and it being like really necessary was so great.
Jay finally got his ACE award, as did the lottery, the Silver Streak, Where's Waldo, and Oh Snap. But all the participants got to experience the glory of bringing their ideas to life.
I love the problem solving that goes into building a machine. Figuring out the drivetrains, figuring out the flotation, where your balance can be. It's a complicated process, and you tie it all together with art and try to have a concept that is coherent and fun and crazy. So
I'm really happy that the machine held up. Some of the modifications we made, they were helpful. Not as helpful as I always wanted them to be, but it was really fun to play with them and see how it worked. Get ideas for next year, get ideas for other ways of doing things.
My goal has been to reach out to other people and help get them involved. The last year it was great to have a team show up on the morning of the race, and someone came up to us and said, "It's your fault that I'm doing this. My son saw your machine and said we have to make one too." And I want that to happen more, and so I'm trying to reach out to schools and programs and anyone who can be interested in, especially getting kids to be involved in this event. I want to help, and I want to help get kids excited about this sort of thing, because making things is awesome. And when you have an excuse to make something like this, it's even more awesome.